A very good morning to you. It is Tuesday, the 21st of January. I'm James Glenday, coming to you from the land of the Wurundjeri people. You are watching News Breakfast and our special coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States. With me to guide us through it all this morning is our American in Oz, Sarah James. Sarah, thank you for getting up so early and being here with us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you on this historic day.
It is going to be an historic day, and we should probably start by going through what we're likely to expect over the next hour and a half or so. The inauguration is going to begin in about half an hour's time. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, will be sworn in. Then Donald Trump will become the 47th President. We've got some live pictures there from the US Capitol. And he is also expected, Sarah, to begin signing pretty soon after the inauguration some of those many executive orders that he has promised for his first day. And then after that, there's all sorts of events through the US Capitol to celebrate the new president. But Sarah, maybe we should start overnight with what's happened, because obviously this is a day of transition. One president leaves and seamlessly another is sworn in, and Joe Biden had a bit to do on his way out of the White House.
Yes, that's right. Before they gathered for tea this morning at the White House, when President Biden said to former President and soon-to-be future President Trump, welcome home, he had a little bit of a surprise, which was some preemptive pardons. This is really quite extraordinary, James. This hasn't happened. This is a set of preemptive pardons for people on the January 6th committee. There's some big names that people will remember, such as former Representative Liz Cheney, Adam Schiff, Democrat and Republican both there, and also really high-profile people such as Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was chief medical expert for the Trump administration during COVID.
Yes, so yeah, very famous for holding those press conferences during the early days of the COVID pandemic. So just take us back, for people who might not be familiar, what is a preemptive pardon, and what will it protect potentially these people from?
Well, it hasn't happened much in American history. I think you've got to go back to things such as President Ford preemptively pardoning former President Nixon. Yes, we're seeing President Biden coming in, James.
There he is, Joe Biden, and of course Kamala Harris there as well. A lot of the people who are actually lucky enough to get a seat inside the Capitol are already seated, so we are really counting down to the start of the ceremony. So these preemptive pardons should potentially prevent investigations, prevent ongoing kind of examination of past conduct.
Exactly. That's the idea. That's the theory of the case. And the idea is that President Trump has said some things in the past about these individuals, and they've wound up on a so-called enemies list. So the idea would be to protect them from having any ongoing problems. President Biden said this is not in any way an admission of wrongdoing, an acknowledgement of guilt. So it'll all be, I have no doubt, be a point of discussion in days ahead, but probably most imminently, we'll see the president going to those executive orders you talked about.
Yes. Well, let's move on to some of those. It's interesting, this idea of a preemptive pardon, because you normally pardon for something that you've definitely
exactly
done.
No, I think it's a fascinating area that is just one sign of how different this is going to be. You know, we haven't in recent history in the United States had a president who's come in having held the job before. So President Trump will be our 47th president of the United States, and he was also the 45th. Okay,
you can see there we're getting those live pictures from the US Capitol ahead of the swearing in. Just on day one, Donald Trump said he wouldn't be a dictator. He did suggest maybe on day one he might sign a lot of executive orders. Over the weekend he suggested nearly 100. What are some of the big focuses, the early focuses of the Trump administration likely to be?
Well, I mean, I'm just taking a moment to kind of absorb all of this, kind of majesty here. And there is a lot of power in the presidency. There's a lot of power in the pen. I think you can right off the bat expect some orders related to immigration, potentially ones that declare emergency conditions, which would, there's Chuck Schumer coming in, some others there. You can expect that to be very much front and center. A lot of people are watching to see if there is any executive order related to birthright citizenship. That's really a cornerstone of the U.S. Constitution, the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which grants citizenship to anyone born on American soil. Very rare in the world, and that is one potential executive order. Also regarding energy, James, I think you can expect this is a president who's coming in having said drill, baby, drill. So he's made it clear that energy is a top priority. So those are a few.
All right, well, let's bring in our North America correspondent, Carrington Clark, who is outside Capital One Arena, where an event is going to take place later today. G'day, Carrington. We've got plenty of questions for you, but I did want to ask, what's the weather like? Because, of course, this inauguration, normally held outside the Capitol, is inside this year because of an Arctic blast.
Yeah, I'm not just wearing this beanie as a fashion choice. It is freezing out here. There's a bitterly cold wind that occasionally picks up. People here are rugged up. They've made the decision to put themselves through a bit of trauma in order to get close to their president, to give Donald Trump this hero's welcome. This arena has become the centre point of these inauguration celebrations. Yesterday we saw the victory rally, which was pre-planned, but now the parade that usually occurs on Pennsylvania Avenue will occur inside this arena, and this will be where Donald Trump comes to meet his most diehard fans. A lot of people in this line, though, have been caught out by the intense security that they find themselves facing when they try to get into the arena. This giant pile of bags and purses besides me is testament to what people are willing to jettison in order to get up close and personal to Donald Trump. You can't even come in here with a clear bag, as is often the case at, say, sporting events in the United States. You can understand, obviously, the increased security, given that we did have multiple assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life through the campaign. But despite the frigid conditions, people here seem genuinely excited to be able to see the person they backed for the presidency take back the reins of power. This is one of the most important days, obviously, on the American political calendar, the inauguration of the new president. This isn't a coronation. This isn't a king taking the throne, but there is a huge amount of pomp and circumstance. And even though this is being held indoors, they are doing what they can to make sure that there are the bells and whistles necessary to give the grandeur that the office requires. The American system relies on only having one president at a time, which is why we saw Joe Biden take advantage of the last few hours of his presidency with passing those pardons for those Jan 6 committee and also for a few other people they thought were at risk from Donald Trump.
And Joe Biden is now entering the rotunda there at the Capitol, and so is Kamala Harris. And just a minute ago we saw Melania Trump come in and join some of the other members of the Trump family who are there as well. Carrington, it's a enormous day. A lot of people had come to Washington hoping to be somewhere close to the inauguration. Are people disappointed that a lot of this is now happening behind closed doors, or are the enthusiastic supporters of Donald Trump just happy to be in town?
No, I think there have definitely been people I've spoken to who are disappointed that they weren't able to have the experience that they thought they would have, which was having thousands, tens of thousands of supporters out on the National Mall, those kind of iconic images that we're so used to when it comes to the inauguration of a new president. They're trying to make the best of what is a less than ideal situation. These people are trying to get into this arena, but there is no way that this arena has the capacity to accommodate all the people who would like to be up close to the president. Other people are obviously going to viewing parties. There's a lot of regalia up around Washington, D.C. welcoming the president. It's also a public holiday here in the United States, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So we are seeing there are less people on the streets than you might expect. But yes, people are disappointed that they weren't able to have the full inauguration experience.
All right, Carrington, thank you. We can just see some live pictures there of the incoming Vice President, J.D. Vance, entering the rotunda just there in front of his wife. Obviously, he is going to be sworn in first during this ceremony, followed by Donald Trump. Then we will have the signing of some executive orders. There's an inaugural lunch, a pass-in review where military troops are reviewed, the presidential parade, which is happening indoors where Carrington is there at Capital One Arena. There's a ceremony at the Oval Office, and then three, not one, Sarah, but three inaugural balls, and one of which I think the Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong has an invitation to.
Yes, and indeed there have already been some inaugural balls, James. I spoke to somebody who went to the Hispanic inaugural ball just on Saturday night there in the United States and said that it was an extraordinary event. So I think, you get all of these inaugural balls that take place. You can see people there in the Capital One Arena. They are able to watch on the live screen, as we mentioned, as Carrington mentioned, rather than being inside. Only 600 people, James, fit inside the rotunda. But I should point out, it's such a historic place. Construction started back in 1793. Famously, the dome was built during the American Civil War, and President Lincoln said it was a testament to the fact that the Union would stand. So there's great history in that rotunda for the 600 people fortunate enough to get in there to actually watch the proceedings in person. And it has quite an intimate feel right there in the center of the Capitol, with the House to one side and the Senate to the other, and all those committee meeting rooms and the others. So yes.
It is an interesting event as well, because Donald Trump doesn't always obey convention. Some would say he sometimes goes out of his way to break it. But one interesting thing is that I think the Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong is the first Foreign Minister from Australia to be invited to an inauguration.
That's, indeed, and an honour for her, an honour for Australia. And this is also the first inauguration where foreign leaders have been invited. So that's another departure, to your point, another departure from tradition. I think for Donald Trump, traditions are there when he likes them, and then he's very happy to break with tradition when he chooses to do so. So he invited the...
Oh, and here comes the President-elect of the US entering the building, saying hello to his wife Melania there.
This is always a time, James, where any harsh words that have been said, the strong disagreements that are there between these two men, between President Biden and President-elect Trump, all of that is put on hold for the moment for the moment of the occasion of this peaceful transfer of power, the fundamental issue of a democracy, and something that goes back to the earliest days of the Republic, when the inauguration took place in New York City prior. And
yes, it hasn't always been in DC, has it?
No, it has not.
We're going to get this. The ceremony is going to begin very, very shortly. I did want to just get your view, because this is day one of the Trump presidency. Do you think that Donald Trump is going to be much more organised this time around? Trump 2.0. The first version of Donald Trump was often accused of being a bit disorganised, jumping from issue to issue. Do you think this is going to be a more disciplined presidency?
I think it will be a more disciplined presidency. I think this is a president who, having done the job before, knows the levers of power. He also comes in with complete fealty from everyone he has chosen to work on his team, including the incoming cabinet. And I think this is not going to be kind of a Lincoln-esque team of rivals in the sense of lots of debate and, we'll figure it out. I think there may be debate for sure, but at the end of the day, one person is going to make the decisions, and that person is going to be President Trump. This, it's a historic occasion for so many reasons, and this is a situation where, as I mentioned, we've only had one other president who served non-sequential terms. You go back to the last days of the 19th century with Grover Cleveland, who had a 4-year break, and now we have that again.
60th presidential
That's Amy Klobuchar.
Today, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance will take their oaths of office, and we will witness the peaceful transfer of power at the heart of our democracy.
Yes, that is Amy Klobuchar giving the call to order at the start of this historic swearing in. We're going to hear as well from Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, the Reverend Franklin Graham, and also from the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. There's going to be some more music, and then we'll have the Vice Presidential Oath of Office, which should be administered by US Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
Our theme this year is our enduring.
There's going to be, I think, a lot of focus today on some of the very, very early things that Donald Trump is going to do through executive orders. How do you think how important, can you just take us through though, is the first 100 days for a US president? Because so often it seems to be this marker that if a new president wants to get anything done, seems ridiculous given they've got 4 years, but the first 100 days is when they've got to really start making that progress before they get overtaken by events.
Yeah, I think no matter what country you're looking at around the globe, those first days when you actually have the excitement, the enthusiasm of your supporters firmly behind you, and you have the willingness of the House and the Senate, in this case, that's going to be intensified because not only has President-elect Trump done this job before, but he comes into power with majorities in the House and Senate, and that's how you get things done. Of course, here in Australia, that's so different, isn't it? That's kind of a given, but not in the United States. So he's saying, I have this mandate, and he wants to get things done. There's another piece to this for that 100 days. You know, you have the U.S. Supreme Court where Trump himself has put several people in that court, and it has moved further to the right. There were indeed these late, I guess, broadening of the power of the presidency and a broadening of immunity as well. So I think that emboldens the president in this instance. Those first 100 days have all kinds of institutional mile markers, things that have to happen, like the budget, the deficit, the debt. All of those things have to happen. But they also, when you talk about somebody who's going to put into action or hope to put into action 100 executive orders, there's going to be a flurry of activity, including pushback, James. Don't expect all of these to go through without challenge. There's quiet, there's harmony in Washington now. It's kind of the silence of everybody waiting for the stroke of the pen and how they respond.
All right, we're going to take a listen now to Senator Amy Klobuchar as she delivers this call to order.
With that responsibility of citizenship comes an obligation not to seek out malice, as President Lincoln once reminded us, but to view others with a generosity of spirit despite our differences. With that responsibility of leadership comes an obligation to stand our ground when we must and find common ground when we can. With everything swirling around us, the hot mess of division, it is on all of us, to quote an incredible songwriter who just happened to be born in my state, to ensure that our nation's democracy is our shelter from the storm. There's a reason this ceremony takes place at the Capitol. In other countries, it might be in a presidential palace or a gilded executive office building. Here, it is traditionally held at the Capitol, the People's House. It is a fitting reminder of the system of checks and balances that is the very foundation of our government, 3 equal branches of government. That is how, for nearly 250 years, our great American experiment, grounded in the rule of law, has endured. So, as we inaugurate a new president and vice president, let us remember that the power of those in this room comes from the people. The construction workers who build our country, the teachers and healthcare workers who nurture us, the troops defending our freedoms, and yes, the firefighters in Los Angeles putting themselves on the line for us. Our democracy's strength and grit must match theirs. May God bless our nation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Endurance through the years is the ultimate test. To persevere through time is the truest measure of an idea, an institution, and a nation. Our founders wrote the Constitution so that America could withstand all the twists and turns of time. They wrote it to guide us and to preserve forever our right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as much as the truths and principles enshrined in our Constitution remain the same, our democracy promises the people the power to change, to chart their own destiny. That's the beauty. That is the importance of democracy. It allows the endurance, the permanence of a nation through change. It allows nations like our United States both to avoid the obstacles and to seize the opportunities God has placed before us, all while staying true to our founding principles. Today is our country's 60th inauguration ceremony. Like all the others before it, it is a celebration of our right to set our uniquely American course. The past several years have been trying at times for many, many Americans, and also for the nations of the free world that we humbly strive to lead. In November, Americans chose again to steer this nation towards greatness, the secure, safe, and prosperous future that our founders envisioned for all of us. And today, we celebrate not only their decision to do so, but also the simple right and wisdom of a free people to make their own choice so that their nation might endure. And now, allow me to welcome Archbishop Timothy Dolan and Reverend Franklin Graham, who will deliver our invocation. Please rise.
Be still and know that I am God, supreme among the nations, supreme on the earth. Let us pray. Remembering General George Washington on his knees at Valley Forge, recalling Abraham Lincoln at his second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Remembering General George Patton's instructions to his soldiers as they began the Battle of the Bulge 8 decades ago. Pray. Pray when fighting. Pray alone. Pray with others. Pray by night. Pray by day. Observing the birthday of the Reverend Martin Luther King, who warned, without God, our efforts turn to ashes. We, blessed citizens of this one nation under God, humbled by our claim that in God we trust, gather indeed this Inauguration Day to pray for our President Donald J. Trump, his family, his advisors, his cabinet, his aspirations, his vice president, for the Lord's blessings upon Joseph Biden, for our men and women in uniform, for each other whose hopes are stoked this new year, this Inauguration Day. We cannot err in relying upon that prayer from the Bible, upon which our president will soon place his hand in oath, as we make our own the supplications of King Solomon for wisdom as he began his governance. God of our fathers, in your wisdom you set man to govern your creatures, to govern in holiness and justice, to render justice with integrity. Give our leader wisdom, for he is your servant, aware of his own weakness and brevity of life. If wisdom which comes not from you be not with him, he shall be held in no esteem. Send, wisdom from heavens that she may be with him, that he may know your designs. Please, God, bless America. Please mend her every flaw. You are the God in whom we trust, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
Mr. President, the last 4 years, there are times I'm sure you thought it was pretty dark. But look what God has done. We praise him and give him glory. Let us pray.
All right, so we are just hearing there more prayers for the new president and the country of the United States as well. There's been a bit of speculation, Sarah, about the colour of Donald Trump's tie, because it is a mix of red and blue, which has been interpreted, and I don't know if people are reading too much into this, as a sign that he wants to show unity on day one.
Well, to that point, the president has said that unity will be a theme of his inaugural address. So I have to say, unity is often a theme of inaugural addresses. I took some time over the weekend to kind of peruse previous inaugural addresses going way back. I kind of ran down that rabbit hole. But it is definitely a theme, and I think that this is a president who feels quite triumphant. He's the first convicted felon who's become president of the United States. You just heard Franklin Graham, son of Billy Graham, Reverend as well, saying, you know, you spent years in the darkness. I mean, was a dark time for the former president, and now he is president-elect, standing poised to do what he has considered in this bookend presidency to complete his agenda, and he is ready.
And we should bring our viewers up to date as well. Just in the past few minutes, or at least this morning, the outgoing President Joe Biden has issued preemptive pardons, more of them, for his brothers, James and Frank, along with his sister Valerie and their spouses as well. In a statement, he said that his family had been subjected to unrelenting attacks and threats motivated solely by a desire to hurt me, the worst kind of partisan politics, and unfortunately I have no reason to believe these attacks will end, which is sort of very interesting.
Yes, again, these are quite remarkable moves. Benny Thompson of Mississippi and Liz Cheney of Wyoming, the two people who led the January 6th committee, one a Democrat, one a Republican, said in response to their pardons that they were pardoned not for breaking the law, but for upholding it. So I think there's bad blood here, and the President Biden, also delivered quite a stark final address in the Oval Office in which he warned that the United States is becoming an oligarchy and talked about what he called the tech industrial complex and too much power being in the hands of a few very rich people. So the final days of the Biden presidency were marked by a stark difference in tone and him speaking his mind about what he sees happening. And you saw some of that echoed in what Senator Amy Klobuchar had to say. She is the chair of the inaugural committee.
Yes, we had a few questions why she was doing that, but yes, she's the chair of the inaugural committee. Many people will remember her for her failed run in that primary to actually take over, to get the nomination that Joe Biden eventually got. Now, we are going to go back live to Washington because the incoming Vice President, J.D. Vance, is about to be sworn in and take the oath of office, which is going to be administered by US Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who is just there on the right.
And he's there with his wife, Isha, and their children.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance to the same.
And allegiance to the same.
that I take this obligation freely,
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Please welcome Chief Justice Roberts to administer the presidential oath of office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
And you can see there, Sarah, we have this sort of dual split screen because of the way this inauguration is taking place because of the cold weather. It's inside the US Capitol in the centre of downtown DC. People who had wanted to be there for the inauguration are instead in the Capital One Arena watching that historic moment when Donald Trump became the 47th US president, and his Vice President J.D. Vance was also sworn in. Pretty soon we're going to hear an inaugural address as well from the president, which is a big moment in any president's tenure.
There is no question about that. The inaugural address is part inspiration, part declaration, and it is also a statement of intent. It's a to-do list. And there have been all kinds of inaugural addresses over the years. There have been ones that have kind of leaned in more to the inspirational mode. I mean, you go back to Lincoln talking in his first address, trying to hold the Union together about the mystic chords of memory and better angels of our nature. You've got John F. Kennedy saying, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So these great moments of inspiration. President Trump, now President Trump's last inaugural address, the phrase that was most remembered, James, was that phrase about American carnage, and that kind of, took on a life of its own. I suspect this will be a very different inaugural address, going from 45 to 47, with President Biden as number 46 sandwiched in between there. And really, I think that's how President Trump regards this. This is a bookend presidency. He had the things he wanted to do in the first 4 years. He got some of them done. Really, in this second transformational presidency, he's in the most institutional building, as Senator Klobuchar called it, the People's House. But he intends to do some dramatic changes that could change the course of American history. Presidents have a lot of power. He will have a pen. He will sign executive orders. That's become more and more popular, by the way, in recent years, as you would know.
Well, he's expected to do that as soon as this ceremony is over. Just for those of you watching along at home as well, Donald Trump was expected to use Abraham Lincoln's Bible for that oath that we just saw delivered, and he was also going to use his personal Bible. They are the same two that he used back in 2017. And that oath of office was administered by the Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court, John Roberts.
It's crowded, isn't it? I mean, putting 600 people, you've been in there.
It is a small space.
Room.
It's not a big room, and a lot of people. There was a lot of talk that not even all the members of Congress would be able to necessarily secure a spot. So,
and there were a few members of Congress, and indeed a few others who chose not to attend.
That's interesting. What did you make of that? Obviously, Donald Trump, didn't take part in the traditional way 4 years ago at all.
He didn't show up. He did not show up, which is unusual.
It's perhaps not surprising that others wouldn't.
And we have former First Lady Michelle Obama is not there in the room. She hasn't given a reason. Neither has Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, who had some long-standing disagreements with President Trump. But also, Nancy Pelosi is recovering from hip surgery. So the reality is they haven't given reasons, but neither of them are there, and there are a couple of congressional representatives who aren't. But most people are. Indeed, 3 former presidents are there as well. Biden, the most recent, President Clinton, President George W. Bush, all there. President Carter died just earlier this month, so at the age of 100. But it is a tradition, fairly recent tradition for former presidents to show up. Back in the old days, going way, way, way back, it wasn't so easy. But in the modern era, it is the tradition for the former presidents to come. Soaring words and great voices, isn't it? I'm enjoying it.
For those of you wondering what you're listening to there in the background, that is the Battle Hymn of the Republic, of course, is performed by the US Naval Academy Glee Club.
And talk about going back to the Union and the Civil War. That's where we get the Battle Hymn of the Republic, that war from 1861 to 1865, where President Lincoln held the Union together at great cost, built the rotunda built the dome over the rotunda at that time. And that's where they're holding this event. That's where they're holding this inaugural celebration, this, as everyone comments, and this is marked on almost every inaugural address, the peaceful transfer of power that is a fundamental element of democracy and of the U.S. democratic experiment. Coming up on, Yes, from one commander-in-chief to another. Donald Trump's promised a revolution of common sense. We're just hearing the 45th and the 47th president. And we are about to hear from Donald Trump, so we are going to listen in now.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the United States Supreme Court, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural. And very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states. And the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. Thank you. Thank you. National unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country. We will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. Let me use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal, and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation, and right now our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America, promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And And that was the newly re-sworn-in President Donald Trump delivering his inaugural address as the 47th President of the United States. You heard it there. He says that sunlight is pouring in over the entire world and that the golden age of America begins right now. We're joined in the studio here this morning by Bridget Brennan. Lovely to have your company this morning. And of course, Sarah James as well, who is still with us. Sarah, we'll go to you. What did you make of that speech? It was, by Donald Trump standards, very disciplined.
Very disciplined, and we talked earlier about how sometimes an inaugural address can be inspirational, and there were moments of inspiration, the golden age. He also talked about in America, the impossible is what we do best. But we also mentioned earlier that an inaugural address can be a to-do list. And I think that is what this speech was. And it was a to-do list that included some things that had been expected, some that will be very controversial, and some that will be challenged legally. And there were applause from some and silence from others. I mean, for example, he talked about ending EV mandates, drill, baby, drill, which is something that he has said constantly. He mentioned that again. Immigration is clearly, that was
emergency on the southern border. It was the first one he talked about.
Very first one he mentioned on the southern border, exactly. And using the act from 1798, which will mean that federal troops, that they will be able to use troops to enforce this. Again, expect legal challenges to be happening, but the reality is these are dramatic moves, and there are symbolic moves here as well. Talking about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. These are symbolic moves about America being the greatest, the first, the best.
We're just wondering whether or not there's been a pause in the music here as they wait for the national anthem there in Washington, D.C. It looks like people are waiting for a fix there. We can't hear any audio currently. So we wonder what's happened there.
While we do wait through that, I mean, was there anything in there that really surprised you?
I think there are some moments where, I mean, he talked again about Panama and taking back the Panama Canal. How exactly does that work? What does that look like? That is currently in control of Panama, so how that occurs, I'm not sure. He also talked about having there be only 2 genders by law, by federal law. That's going to be very controversial in the United States and ending diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
A sign of the times, not something you would have heard in previous inauguration speeches.
Definitely not. And another piece, I mean, you know, we're watching this beautiful, peaceful transfer of power when 4 years ago and a few days was January 6th, and you heard him referring to that. Of course, that was when protesters who did not think the president had lost the election, President Trump had lost, stormed the Capitol. And then there was the January 6th committee that investigated that. You heard the president talking about the sense of betrayal, I think you'd have to say, that he felt. And that is going to be an element here as well as following up on that, which probably links back to the preemptive pardons that President Biden did on his way out the door.
We discussed, obviously, there's a lot going on in D.C. today, including the transition. I always think this is one of those fascinating things, how all these staff members have to race into the White House and basically turf out everything of the old administration and move everything from the new administration. I think they've got 5 hours to do it. So they'll no doubt be hoping that things are running a little bit behind time. We did have some questions as well, who that has been. That's Senator Deb Fisher. She's the Republican counterpart to Amy Klobuchar on the inaugural committee, who has been playing a key role in proceedings today. We also heard, I thought it was interesting, with the COVID military expulsions, that's going to be undone. And a lot of these executive orders on day one also seem to be about taking back, unwinding some of the stuff that the Biden administration did immediately as well.
And we're hearing about Jerusalem at the moment, and of course one of the most significant moments in the speech, which got everybody to their feet, was talking about the fact that the hostages, the first group of hostages, Israeli hostages held by Hamas, have been released, and Palestinians have been released by the Israeli side. This was really a dual process by the outgoing Biden administration and now Trump Trump administration. But I think there's really widespread feeling in Washington that it wouldn't have happened. This was a plan that sat there. President Biden had delivered it back in May, and it wouldn't have happened without Trump coming into the White House again and using his muscle to get it across the line.
Donald Trump taking some credit for that. He did certainly, Sarah, outline some steps he'll take to undo some of President Biden's achievements. He spoke about the Green New Deal in particular.
Yeah, that's a huge piece of legislation. That was it's been, the biggest piece of climate legislation that the United States has ever passed. And I should also point out, and there's a lot of infrastructure spending that went on in the Biden administration. So EV mandates, those are going to be gone by executive order. So that's a big change as well. And fascinating, one must say, because you've got at the same time, no EV mandates, more, support for you, Detroit, and home of automotive manufacturing, traditional automotive manufacturing, and Elon Musk, the kind of name in electric vehicles in the United States, they're firmly behind President Trump, the head of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which the president is putting into place. That's a new one. And then this external tax revenue office. That's brand new. I mean, we have the Internal Revenue Service, nicknamed in America the Infernal Revenue Service, the IRS, which is the body that, collects our taxes. But the idea of tariffs and external taxes, exactly what tariffs are, something that are well known, of course, but what are these external taxes? What's that going to look like? A lot of nations, including Australia, of course, are watching that very closely to see how much those tariffs are going to be, who's going to have to pay how much, and how that will play out. So that's another big one. Yeah. So this really was quite,
it's quite a list. I can see your notes, you're writing away frantically. If you are just joining us, Donald Trump has just delivered his inaugural speech. He called Inauguration Day Liberation Day. He made this point about his assassination attempt, Sarah, saying his life was saved by God to make America great again, and he spoke about those tariffs. The Foreign Minister Penny Wong is in the United States at the moment representing Australia. We heard from the Prime Minister last night saying that the President had reassured him that Australia would have a perfect relationship with the US, whatever a perfect relationship looks like. I'm guessing, does the fact that we have a trade surplus in the right direction help Australia, do you think?
I think so. Okay. I think so. We're also, I think you'd have to say in the good books in terms of all the money that's been put on the line for AUKUS and those subs, those American Virginia-class nuclear-powered subs. So, yeah, there's a lot of reasons. And then it's just true that President Trump got along very well with Australia in his first administration, and there's reason to believe that that would continue in this administration as well. So, Australia, I think, is one of those nations that's not looking at itself in the way some other nations are as, let's use Canada and Mexico as two examples of countries that are the closest neighbors to the United States, and both of whom have had
some sharp criticisms from the incoming president. There has been a lot of discussion, Sarah, about Donald Trump's foreign policy agenda more broadly. We didn't hear very many specifics in that speech, but he did say our power will stop all wars in a world that's become angry and violent, referencing some of the challenges around the globe at the moment. What influence do you think the voters will have on Donald Trump's agenda? Because we heard from so many Americans in the lead up to the election that they wanted America to be out of foreign policy quagmires.
Well, I think that's a great point, because he actually, he mentioned that in his speech. He said the wars that we won't fight, to paraphrase what he had to say. So I think he's going to take, first thing that comes to my mind is Ukraine. What's going to be happening with Ukraine? How is that going to be looked at? And definitely people who watch the geopolitical space also look at Taiwan and China's interest in that island, independent, democratic nation that China has long said is Chinese territory. So those are two areas to watch, but there are many others. But to your point about the voting base, the MAGA base, he called out Black and Hispanic voters. The Republican Party drew from Black and Latino communities in much greater numbers than they have. Those voters, large numbers of them, swung to vote for President Trump, and he really called them out and said, I will work for you. So, and again, you find these, these fascinating contradictions and intersections where on the one hand you have that huge support, and then you also have the president saying, I'm going to take aim at those who are illegally in the United States and talking about criminals. Let's point out that many of the millions of undocumented immigrants who are in the United States, and I think there's an estimated 11 million, many of them are not breaking the law, except I guess by being in the country without permission. But many of them have been there for years. They have families, they have businesses.
They add to the economy, right?
Exactly. And the process of exiting people, NBC News had a report that there are estimates that could be $88 billion for 1 million. So, I mean, a lot of details, but to the point, he's listening to his base and he's kind of referring to them as well.
I wanted to ask you as an American, going to Mars, does that appeal to the national sentiment? I mean, Donald Trump's come back to this so many times. It's a very big thing.
We saw a wide smile from Elon Musk there.
Yeah, well, of course. I think that is part of the American identity, I think. That
American
kind of
exceptionalism?
Yes, and exploration in space. And you go back to Kennedy, we do this not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And NASA has long wanted this. I mean, you talk to people at NASA, and they very much envision this as being part of the future. So I think that's much more broadly. I think what he is doing is asserting the fact that he wants to see the United States dominant in that space. I mean, there are other nations with exploration in space and interest in space. So I think that is a piece of it. But to your point about American exceptionalism, he referenced some things that are kind of not talked about very often anymore, except derisively, such as manifest destiny, which was this concept by which kind of goes with that American exceptionalism, by which the United States justified back in the mid-1800s this idea of pushing west and taking territory in Texas and then in Oregon, and that created the United States. But that's not so much talked about now, and he's going right back to that. So interesting threads that he's drawing from.
I think we've got some photos and images, obviously, of this morning's events of Donald Trump being sworn in. If you are just joining us, it happened pretty rapidly this morning, exactly to schedule, about 52 minutes ago, 4 o'clock local time here on the east coast of Australia. And then we had that inaugural address, which ran for about 30 minutes, which is, by Donald Trump standards, pretty snappy. It was very much to the point, and it was, I think it's being reported this way pretty widely, a substantially different speech to the one he gave when he was inaugurated the first time back in 2016.
I think that is true. I think he has a vision for what he wants to achieve. He has had 4 years in the wilderness, so to speak, the political wilderness, to contemplate what he wants to do, to pull to him those he considers to be the most loyal, and the team that he has assembled around him, from those kind of loyal folks who supported him politically to kind of newer people. The tech team, right? You saw huge buy-in, quite literally, from some of the tech billionaires who are there and who gave money, $1 million or so to each of them, to the inaugural committee to kind of create this event. It does have a cost. And that's, that kind of confluence of the political side on the one hand and the Silicon Valley tech elite on the other is what he's drawing on.
It's a new paradigm, isn't it?
It is a new paradigm.
And it's not something we've probably seen before in terms of that potential influence, Sarah. Yeah.
No.
You can see we've got those live pictures of what is still taking place in the US Capitol at the moment. You are watching our special coverage of Donald Trump's inauguration as the 47th President of the United States. It's been an extremely busy day in Washington. There's been a church service, a meeting between the Trumps and the Bidens at the White House. Joe Biden has issued a series of preemptive pardons for people that he fears might be a target of a new Republican administration. Pretty soon we are expecting Donald Trump to go to a different part of the US Capitol and start brandishing a pen and begin signing many of those executive orders he spoke about introducing on his first day in office. Afterwards, there's a special lunch, a pass-in review, a presidential parade, which is happening indoors at a big stadium in Washington, D.C., where many of Donald Trump's supporters are gathered. And then we have the inaugural balls and things like that tonight, which is where the great and good, the influential, the donors all gather to try to get a moment with a new member of the Trump administration.
And the national anthem, and the President of the United States, President Trump, who is also the Commander-in-Chief, who is saluting as the song, the anthem, is sung, penned by Francis Scott Key during the War of 1812 in the harbor of Baltimore as he saw the bombs bursting. And indeed, the U.S. Capitol was burned during that war in 1814. So, you know, an incredibly symbolic song in this space that was burned and holds fast as one of the great institutions.
You can still go and see that flag. It's in there. And this is being sung by Christopher Macchio. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. He has performed a couple of times through this ceremony this morning.
Such a beautiful building, isn't it, Sarah? I've had a chance to be inside it, and the detail on that ceiling and the weight of history that those pillars hold is quite something.
Oh, I agree. It's a stunningly beautiful building. And it's also, it is the people's house, as Senator Klobuchar pointed out. And, you know, the legislative branch of government, the three branches of government. You see that beautiful shot from outside, the flag waving, a nice stiff breeze, and about -3 degrees.
I was going to say, it looks a bit better. The weather, of course, this is all happening inside instead of outside because of forecast weather of very, very cold conditions, well below zero. But it doesn't seem to be quite as bad as predicted.
No, although we did have a president who got pneumonia.
1841.
Exactly, and gave a probably too long inaugural address of 2 hours and
2 hours
passed away, and there was a new president about a month later. So yeah,
that
I think
DC cold can bite, and I'm sure everyone's got their thermals on today. Sarah, it always strikes me as something quite extraordinary to see the bipartisanship on show, and also to watch the faces of the presidents behind the incoming president as someone else ushers in a new era. It's quite extraordinary.
And this is a time where this president, President Trump, has said he is going to usher in a dramatically new era, the golden age, he calls it, and his supporters are extremely excited. I mean, he talked about the fact that nobody thought he could make this comeback. He is the first convicted felon to become president of the United States. He faced legal woes, and one of the things he talked about, I mentioned this because he talked in his inaugural address about the weaponization of the Justice Department. And you can expect this administration is going to change the Justice Department. He has his new Attorney General nominee, Pam Bondi, another one of the Florida group who are part of this team. And he is you could see the outrage on his face as he talked about that. So I think that will be there will be institutions that he will try to change, put his mark on, reshape. And we can expect that in this administration as well.
And some of those people who were involved in the January 6 riots would have been watching very closely, no detail as yet as what the incoming president may do for those people who were...
who stormed the Capitol.
Yeah, who were charged with very serious crimes.
Yes, and just to kind of keep this all in memory, that was 4 years
and
a few days ago on January 6, 2020. And, you know, there was that, those extraordinary scenes at the Capitol of the group of individuals storming the Capitol and breaking in as they did the vote for the they did that kind of electoral college vote, and then that scene of the peaceful transfer of power a few days later, at which President Trump did not attend. And now, 4 years later, a different transition yet again with former presidents there, President Obama, President Clinton, of course, President Biden, President George W. Bush there in this harmonious moment, which, being Washington, in not very long, you'll start to see sparks fly.
I was going to say, maybe within hours, potentially, if all of those orders are signed as we expect they are going to be. You can see that a lot of people have already filed out now of the Capitol Rotunda. It was the hottest ticket in town because it was moved indoors. There wasn't a lot of space. And so there is the new president with his wife, Melania. And good morning again. If you are just joining us, you are watching a special edition of News Breakfast, where we've been bringing you the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States. In the past hour, the President was sworn in along with J.D. Vance as his Vice President. In his inaugural address, the new President pledged to bring back a golden age, his words, of American industry and discovery.
That's right, James. Donald Trump promised to usher in a tide of change, vowing to crack down on immigration, bring down inflation and reform the health system. He also announced what he called a colourblind and merit-based society, a policy of only two genders, his words. Donald Trump's second presidential term is sure to reshape society in America and around the world over the next 4 years. We've got our American in Oz, Sarah James, here with us. Sarah, to distill this all for our viewers at home. Extraordinary scenes there at the Capitol.
Pleasure to be with you on this momentous, this historic occasion. You know, it's going back to the 19th century that we've had a president who had one term, the people voted him out, and then he got another, and that was Grover Cleveland at the very end of the 19th century. And now here we are again with President Trump, the 47th President of the United States, having been the 45th President of the United States, a historic turnaround. And he is also the first president to be a convicted felon. And he made a mention in his inaugural address of his what really looked like outrage, he did not use that word, at the Justice Department, who he believes like unfairly prosecuted him and targeted him. And it is clear that he will that will be one item on his agenda. But, you know, when you look at Australia, I think tariffs are going to be one thing that people are watching for. And there was mention in this speech of an external revenue service. Now, we have an internal revenue service in the United States, which takes our taxes. But the focus on having money come into the United States from other countries, that is definitely a big part of this. Immigration, which you mentioned. No question that's front and center, and energy as well. Those are just some of the big picture pieces of legislation that he's going to do with the stroke of a pen when he signs 100 executive orders.
Could be starting to happen now. Hopefully we'll get some pictures of that in a moment. But first, let's just take a listen back to what Donald Trump said during his inaugural address.
We are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies.
Part of Donald J. Trump's speech there at the Capitol Rotunda as he's sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Sarah, what were some of the main themes for you in Donald Trump's speech?
I think the main theme, this golden age, the sense of the impossible, and he really put at the heart of this America first. You know, he made that the key theme in his campaign, and across the board, if you look at all the things that he was talking about, social, economic, symbolic, renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. That is an example. Talking about securing the southern border and immigration and bringing the power of the government to bear as a president with an executive order to secure the nation's boundaries. Kind of who's in, who's out. And that was a giant theme of this. And I think you also got this theme, again, this is a bookend presidency, that he has come in, disciplined in your word, James, ready to move, that he has his team assembled, that they all have enormous loyalty to him personally, and that he is where it starts and ends. He talked about not wanting to get into wars that he doesn't need to get into and winning the ones that he has. But all of these, if you put it all back together, it's this idea of America being the first, the greatest, the best, and that has been a theme for Donald Trump from his first campaign until his second inaugural address in this really historic second election.
In his first term, Donald Trump was sometimes even accused by his closest supporters and backers that he just wasn't focused enough and disciplined enough to get certain things through. Do you think this time around he is going to, well, I mean, he outlined a pretty clear list there, outline his priorities and have the people to get things done a bit more efficiently?
I think that's the key. I think he has individuals in place that he is putting into his team who either think like him or will carry out the plans that he wants to put into place. And I mean, some of these are quite controversial picks. Pete Hegseth, for example, to head the Defense Department is just one example. And he has more controversial picks who are coming up, like RFK Jr. to run health and Tulsi Gabbard to be Director of National Intelligence. But moving aside from that, he has got both houses of Congress. He's got a majority in the Senate, and that's what you need for confirmation. He has a few who are potentially going to wobble on some of these nominees, but what he is really, he cracks the whip, and he has said, look, I won big. In America, the impossible is what we do best. He used himself as a personal example. No one thought I could do this. He has reshaped the Republican Party. Those who were not with him either quit or got on side, and there have been new people elected. And the term primaried has been turned into a verb. If somebody opposes him, they get primaried.
Get primaried, yes. And if you did miss it, he even hinted at divine intervention, saying that a bullet missed his ear. He was saved by God from that assassin's bullet in order to make America great again. And he got a lot of cheers when he said that. You can see we're seeing some live pictures now from just in front of the US Capitol, where the new president is standing alongside the outgoing president, Joe Biden.
Coats are on. It's a very cold day in Washington, D.C. As we can see, everyone looking pretty chilly there. So the Trumps have departed the Capitol Rotunda with the Bidens as well. They'll depart soon on a Marine helicopter that awaits them outside the Capitol.
There's a lot going on in DC throughout the day. We're going to be speaking to our North America Bureau Chief Jade McMillan in just a moment. She is outside the US Capitol. There's an inaugural lunch. There's a presidential parade which is being held indoors this year at the Capital One Arena, where we saw that really interesting duality of having the kind of intimate crowd inside the Capitol Rotunda in Washington and the very large crowd, some 20,000 or so, inside Capital One Arena in downtown Washington, DC, mainly of Trump supporters who are no doubt very, very keen to see him later today. And one of the interesting things, if you are just waking up this morning, we've mentioned it a couple of times, is that foreign representatives are actually at this inauguration in bigger numbers and in more significant representation. The Foreign Minister Penny Wong was Australia's representative there.
Before. There haven't been foreign dignitaries invited to the inauguration. That's another kind of break with tradition from this president. And, you know, as we see the motorcade driving off, President Biden, now former President Biden, greeted President Trump this morning when they had tea before the inauguration, saying welcome home. But this followed President Biden issuing those preemptive pardons, which is also historic.
So we should talk about this, because a preemptive pardon, I think a lot of people might be wondering what it actually does, because a pardon implies that you need to be pardoned for something and that you have definitely done something. So what's a preemptive pardon?
Well, I think it's a legal slight stretch maneuver to try to cover, to give immunity and protect some individuals who feared reprisal from President Trump because of some of the things that he said and because of what had happened. And for that, we're talking about the January 6th committee. Pardon me, that was the committee that investigated what happened on January 6th, where the mob stormed the Capitol. And so that was investigated by, many of our viewers will remember the name Liz Cheney and also Benny Thompson of Mississippi. So those were two of the individuals. They came out very quickly with a statement saying we weren't pardoned for doing something against democracy, but for supporting democracy. But then other people like Anthony Fauci, who was the chief medical person for the Trump White House. I mean, you know, this is somebody who's not a political name at all. This is a doctor, you know, a medical professional. But these were individuals that President Biden, he said it's not saying they're guilty, but these are people who had featured in some of President Trump's diatribes. So I think there was just a way to keep
precaution as well. And I think some of the outgoing presidents, or the former presidents now, his siblings as well, to ensure that the investigations
really
into his family.
Yeah,
I hadn't actually heard that before, that was a possibility.
He said they'd been subject to unrelenting abuse and attacks.
And I mean, this, again, so much of this is what we just haven't seen before. I mean, when you talk about, like, historically preemptive pardons, I think about President Ford pardoning outgoing President Nixon. But that was a very different circumstance. So, you know, again, here's what I can tell you for sure. Lawyers will be busy in America across a lot of different sectors. I've spoken to immigration lawyers, they're anticipating that they will be busy. I can imagine for those in the trans community, hearing that they're now going to be, by law in the United States, two genders. There's going to be challenges there. He mentioned changes in education. There's drilling that will very likely take place. And of course, President Biden had also preemptively declared some areas off limits. I bet that will be challenged by the incoming Trump administration. This is a very different administration, and President Trump is coming in with as I said, a to-do list and an understanding of how he wants to do it, with the team he has to do it for him, and with both houses of Congress.
And some unfinished business, I imagine, from his previous terms there.
Definitely, and a sense of outrage at how he was treated.
We'll head back to our team in the US now. Our North America Bureau Chief Jade McMillan is outside the US Capitol in Washington, and correspondent Carrington Clark is at Capital One Arena. Jade, we'll start with you. It was an unusual swearing-in ceremony.
Yeah, that's right. This is always such a big moment on the US political calendar, but because of these freezing cold temperatures that we've got in Washington at the moment, when I last checked it was -5 degrees Celsius, but the feels like temperature was around -9. So because of those conditions, the swearing-in ceremony was moved to inside the Capitol Rotunda. That meant that there was limited capacity. A lot of Donald Trump supporters who travelled here from other parts of the country to be part of this moment weren't able to get a spot inside. There were a number of dignitaries. All of the living former US presidents were there, a couple of world leaders, and also several tech bosses, including the billionaire Tesla CEO Elon Musk, someone who has become so politically aligned with Donald Trump, who poured huge amounts of money into his election campaign. He was there, as well as Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. As is tradition, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, was sworn in first before Donald Trump once again took the oath of office. He was surrounded by his family, his wife Melania, and his children. And in this first speech that he has now made as the 47th President of the United States, he promised a golden age for the country now that he's been returned to power. He spent quite a lot of this address criticising the now former Biden administration, criticising Joe Biden's team in a number of areas, including for its handling of recent natural disasters, such as the Los Angeles fires. He repeated his accusations that the justice system had been weaponised against him following the 4 separate criminal cases that were brought against Donald Trump after he left the White House last time. Let's not forget that he is returning to the Oval Office as a convicted felon, having recently been sentenced in the New York hush money case. He wasn't given any penalties in that case, but nonetheless, he criticised or appeared to criticise those prosecutions. He also referenced the attempt on his life, having survived an assassination attempt during the election campaign. He again said that he believed God had saved him in order for this moment to happen. But here's a little bit more of what Donald Trump had to say in this first speech since again being sworn in.
The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
That's Donald Trump speaking there during his inaugural address just a short time ago. And Jade, Donald Trump's promise to get straight to work, it might even be happening as we speak.
Yeah, he'd flagged in the lead up to today that he'd be taking dozens of executive actions on day one. As expected, immigration is already looking like it's going to be a big focus. He campaigned heavily on the issue of border security during the election campaign, and so he wanted to be seen to be taking a tough stance on that issue from the beginning. He announced in his address that he would be declaring a national emergency on the US southern border with Mexico, that he'd be sending troops to the border and immediately beginning deportations. He has promised to carry out the largest deportation program in US history. He also announced moves on energy policy. He'll declare a national emergency on energy, fulfilling that campaign slogan that we heard so often of drill, baby, drill when it comes to oil and gas drilling. He's also going to again withdraw withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. He said that he'd end diversity programs, or suggested he'd end diversity programs in the US government and change official policy so that only two genders of male and female are formally recognised. What we didn't hear from the now president in that speech was an announcement on whether he'd pardon some of the people who were convicted over the January 6 Capitol attacks, the attack on this very building 4 years ago after he refused to concede defeat to Joe Biden. He has suggested that some of those pardons would be forthcoming, but there's a very long day still ahead of us.
And you, Carrington, now you're outside the Capital One Arena with a crowd of Trump supporters. What's the mood like there?
Yeah, it's pretty loud here. What we're dealing with is the people who unfortunately haven't made it in to the arena which will hold this indoor parade. The extravaganza that was planned for the inauguration ceremony was curtailed by these frigid conditions. And so the people you see behind me are the ones who have been told that they just won't make it in. There are still some pressed up against the fence, hoping against hope that perhaps some space may become available. But they were hanging on every word that they heard from Donald Trump as that speech was broadcast here to the masses. And you can tell that there is this sense of enthusiasm, excitement that their hero, their political hero, has once again taken the reins of power. I would expect most of these people would now try and find space indoors to try to watch the rest of today's festivities. But these are the die-hard Trump supporters. These are the people who have returned him to the White House. And this is a very different atmosphere than it was back in 2017. At that point, a lot of people thought that this was a political fluke. This political neophyte who'd never fought a political battle had taken the presidency against all the polls. He did win the popular vote. He won in the Electoral College. And now he is promising a total overhaul of the government. He is promising that action begins on day one. So we wait to see see what happens from here. This isn't the crowd that Donald Trump would have liked. They can only fit about 20,000 people into the arena behind me. But he will be surrounded by his die-hard fans, and he can expect that hero's welcome.
A jubilant mood, no doubt. And in the final hours, Carrington, Joe Biden issued a number of pardons. What can you tell us about those?
Yeah, it's quite an extraordinary move for the president. America does have this system. This is the most important day on their political calendar, and this transfer of power between the two presidents. And in the dying days of Joe Biden's presidency, he decided to use the powers vested in him as the president to make some sweeping pardons, both for those people involved in the investigation into the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. But then even in the dying minutes of his presidency, when he had actually already entered the US Capitol to watch the swearing in of Donald Trump, he announced, or the White House announced, that he had pardoned members of his family. Now, he says that this is not evidence that they did anything wrong, but he said that he needed to take this action to ensure that they weren't prosecuted by his political enemies. This is quite an extraordinary move from the president, Joe Biden, in the last few minutes of his political career, and it will now be a major footnote to his political career and something that will, I'm sure, be attacked by those on the opposite side of the political ledger.
Carrington, thank you. We're seeing live pictures here from Washington, D.C. President Trump arriving to sign those executive orders, James.
Yeah, and we've got a statement just in the last little bit from the new White House, which lists what they call President Trump's America First priorities. They're a lot of what we heard in the speech, things like securing the border, deportation, more deportations, suspending refugee settlement, using armed forces and the National Guard to engage in border security, designating drug cartels. And we're going to take you now, though, to J.D. Vance, the new Vice President, who is speaking.
In that speech, and I hope to myself that he wasn't going to hold back, and sir, you didn't hold back. That was a hell of a way to start the next 4 years. But I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, and I know I speak for the president and for all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you for making this possible. We love you. We wouldn't be here without you, and we're going to make America great again together for the next 4 years. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, having stood outside for about 5 minutes to wave goodbye to the Bidens, thank God we moved that thing indoors, because it was a beautiful ceremony and it was cold as hell outside. So, sir, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
No, he's right. I said, oh, look at this beautiful sunny day. We blew it, and then I went outside and we were freezing. You would have been very unhappy. The sun was very deceptive, I will tell you. It is cold out. And I'm sort of saying, you know, that was so beautiful today. Maybe they should do it there every 4 years. Does that make sense? I don't know. Because, you know, the outdoor thing is really good, but it gets a little cold around this time of the year, as some people have noticed. And a lot of times they suffer through it. There was no suffering in that room. It was 72 degrees. It was perfect with the best acoustics I think I've ever heard in a room. This is not so bad either. But I just want to say, you're a younger, far more beautiful audience that I just spoke to. And I want to keep it off the record. I want to keep that off the record, because I don't want to have all those big shots up there. I don't want to think you're more powerful than them, you look better than them, and I love you. Now, we just had a great time. We just had a great day. This was amazing. You know, when you think we took a journey, I mentioned in the speech, a lot of people said that was not a journey that was possible, and it was indeed possible. I didn't really know too much about what they were saying when they said that, but a lot of people felt it, and we hooked up with J.D. very early. I watched J.D. over a period of time. I endorsed him in Ohio. He was a great senator, and very, very smart. The only one smarter than him was his wife. That was, I would have chosen her, but somehow the line of succession didn't work that way, right? But now she's great, and he's great. This is a great, beautiful couple, and unbelievable career. I just said to him, you are very upwardly mobile, because he hasn't been doing it that long, but he picked it up so quickly. Remember, the first week was a little bit like the fake news was hitting him really hard. And I said, ooh, this may be tough, but after that, it was smooth sailing for him. He took on everybody. He took on the meanest. I don't want to use the word corrupt because we're into a new system, so let's wait till the corruption begins, because it will. But he took on some pretty mean people, and he handled it well. I want to also congratulate Mike Johnson for the job that he's doing. Steve, we gave him a majority of almost nothing, and then I said, to make it tougher on him, let me take 2 or 3 of the people, right? I said, he'll only have to suffer with that for about 3 months. How are they doing, by the way? Are they? Is that moving along?
Totally unified.
I said, do you mind if I take this one, that one, and a couple of others? He didn't mind. He can handle it. No, he's a man that's liked by everybody. I've never met a man like this. You've got how many is it, 219 or 220 or something? 220. And of the 220, 219 really like him. I noticed he got 1 negative vote once about 2 weeks ago. But I think even 220 like him, if you want to know the truth. And that's very unusual. I know a lot of nice guys in Congress, and they have 35 people that hate him. So if you have 35 people that hate you and you only have 1 or 2 or 3 votes, you'll have 5, I think. But that's going to be like, you know, the good news is when we get to that 5 number, it's going to feel like a massive majority. You can be really nasty to a couple of them at least, you know? So it's going to feel like hitting your head on the wall and stopping. It feels so good to stop. But he's done a fantastic job. And Steve Scalise he's our hero because, you know, I was with him. You talk about being shot. I was with him. He got some bad ones, and his incredible wife, and she really loves him. You know, you never know about that. I've been with other people. They were doing poorly, and the wife is like looking at her watch. She can't get out of the hospital fast enough. How's he doing? Oh, I don't know. He's all right. That woman was a mess. She was crying and crying. No, they're going to take him. They're going to take him. I told Steve when he finally woke up, it was a while too, The doctor told me it was the most blood they've ever transfused in any patient. They've never done anything like it. And here he is, the picture of strength, right? And he's been a great friend of mine, right? With a family, because of a family. And what a job you did. It worked out pretty much better than we even thought, right? And I did have a couple of things, to say that were extremely controversial. And between J.D. and Melania and anybody else that heard, please, sir, it's such a beautiful, unifying speech. Please, sir, don't say these things. I said, I'm telling you, it's going to play great. They say, you're right. For this group of people, it's going to play great. You're the only ones I hurt by not, but we had some beauties, didn't we, Melania? She said, sir, calls me sir when she's angry. No, I'm only kidding. I better say I'm only kidding, or the press is going to pick that one up loud and clear. No, but she said, no, I think it would be terrible. It's such a nice speech. I think it's, it all depends on your delivery. How was the delivery? Was it good? But she said it's such a beautiful speech. You can't put things in there that you were going to put in. And I was going to talk about the J6 hostages, but you'll be happy because, it's action, not words that count. And you're going to see a lot of action on the J6 hostages. See a lot of action. And I was going to talk about the things that Joe did today with the pardons of people that were very, very guilty of very bad crimes, like the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs, where they literally, what they did is they destroyed and deleted all of the information, all of the hearings, practically not a thing left. They deleted all the information on Nancy Pelosi having turned down the offer of 10,000 soldiers. You wouldn't have needed 10,000. You could have had 500, and it would have stopped. Because we may have had 1 million people that day, the people that were there. You don't see any photographs, but we have a lot of great photos. But you don't see those photographs. They don't put them in. They show the people at the Capitol. But I was talking about that. I was going to talk about that. They said, please don't bring that up right now. You can bring it up tomorrow. I said, how about now in front of the I'll bring it up right now. This little time delay is good because we're getting great reviews on the speech. Now watch. They'll take the speech and say, I didn't like it because he left there and he's talked to people. But we're giving you a little more information than we gave upstairs. But no, they pardoned a lot of people. They pardoned, before we even get to today, they pardoned, 33 murderers, absolute murderers, the worst murderers. When you get the death sentence in the United States, you have to be bad, because they don't give it much. And he pardoned almost everybody having a death sentence. And if you went through the crimes that were committed, you wouldn't even believe them, the level of violence, the people that were killed, the innocence of people that were killed, and children killed by these people. And he pardoned them for whatever reason. He spared them, but they didn't spare the people that they killed. And who knows what happens in the future. It's one of the worst, because a lot of times they let them out early after that. They say you're going to be in for life, but then all of a sudden they get let out for good behavior, and then they go on a rampage. It's one of those little things, right? But I was going to talk about that. But I was really going to talk about the level of, what's going on. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to help a guy like Milley? Why are we doing Milley? He was pardoned. What he said, terrible what he said. Why are we helping some of the people? Why are we helping Liz Cheney? Liz Cheney is a disaster. She's a crying lunatic, and crying Adam Kinzinger. He's a super crying. I never saw the guy not crying. He's always crying. I looked at him. I remember years ago he was actually on my side. And then one day, when you don't want to kill people in wars, they turn against you. Liz Cheney hated the concept of not going to war with everybody. Let's kill everybody. Let's spend a lot of money on military equipment, where her father works, right? And but what she did was incredible. Think of it. They destroyed and deleted all of that information that went on for almost 2 years against Trump. And the reason they did, because it was all false. Like the person that said, I tried to strangle a Secret Service agent. That's one of the toughest human beings I think I've ever seen. I actually had a friend saying, please don't change that, sir. You are the coolest sucker in history. Remember, she said, I put my hands around his neck because he wouldn't go to the Capitol. Made up fiction. And I was rebuffed. And the guy on the right is a massive weightlifter, probably stronger than me. Do you think he's stronger than me, honey? You know who I'm talking about. Possibly stronger than me. Slightly younger than me, like, I won't say how many years because I don't want to talk about that, but a lot of years. But I had a friend that said, why are you disputing that story? That's the coolest story I've ever heard. That I would attack a karate champion, get slightly rebuffed, and then throw my arms around a guy with a neck about this big. Even though there are bars, you know, there are bars, you can't really do that anyway. So I wanted to talk about that. But all of that stuff got deleted. And the reason it got deleted is they were all caught in lies. You know, Secret Service testified, and they said it didn't happen. Actually, the two guys were very embarrassed. They're suffering because their friends are saying, did Trump really do that to you? But they gained a whole new respect for me. But it was just make-believe stuff, and there were a lot of make-believe stories made up. So rather than suffer the wrath, like the story with Nancy Pelosi, I offered her 10,000 soldiers. She knows it. She admitted it on tape that her daughter made. She's a videographer or whatever you call her, which I'm glad she is. Oh, she can't be in good stead with Nancy. But Nancy said it was my responsibility as she's leaving the Capitol. She said it was, and it was. She's in charge of security at the Capitol. But I offered them up to 10,000 soldiers, even more. One time I said more, as many as you need. But you needed 400 or 500. If 4 or 5, you 10,000, that would be more than the number of people there by lot. But we offered her 10,000. Think of it, 10,000 soldiers. In other words, J6 wouldn't be J6. There would have been no J6. But she rebuffed them. She didn't like it. No, she didn't like it. Maybe she wanted that to happen. But she's guilty as hell. And now we would have to go through the process because they destroyed all evidence. They deleted everything. There's virtually nothing left. The other fake story and so many other fake stories. And many people came out on our side. And those people now would got to find them. There's nothing left. So that's a criminal offense. If that were a civil case, it would be a criminal offense. If that happened civilly where you did that, it would be a criminal offense. So I decided I'm not going to make this speech complicated. I'm going to make it beautiful. I'm going to make it a unifying speech. And then when they said we have a group of people that are serious Trump fans, I said, this is the time to tell those stories. He knows. So anyway, but seriously, I'd like to, I think it was a tremendous success. I think we're very lucky we put it inside because it is really cold. We just went to the helicopter out of respect to something that's taken place for a long time. I guess it's as old as helicopters. You used to get into a stagecoach, now you get into a helicopter. Times change. But it's pretty old custom. And it's a beautiful custom, actually. It's a beautiful custom. I wish we could have had a better relationship. I wish we could have had a better relationship between Republicans and Democrats. I was with Senator Schumer. I said, Chuck, I think it's time we all start getting along a little bit because it doesn't make sense. I mean, we literally never get a Democrat vote. They never get a Republican vote, almost. And although there is a bill coming up very shortly that we have a lot of Democrat votes, right? That's going to be a very beautiful bill. We're going to have a deciding, I would say, within a week or so, I think. And it's going to be a very good bill. You all know what I'm talking about. So I just want to thank you all for being here. You have been our fans from day one, all these people all over. You've been our fans. This has been there's never been anything like it. There's never been anything like it. This has been a movement like no movement ever in history for probably any country, let alone this country. You know, if somebody's running for president, and if they go out and they announce they're going to Arizona, they're going to Nevada, they're going to someplace, if you have 200 or 300 people, that would be standard. Ronald Reagan would go out. I mean, outside of the last couple of days where people get a little excited, but even then you have a couple of thousand people. But if you're going to go someplace, any place, any one of the swing states, any one of the other states, I mean, how about the non-swing states? We won Alabama by 48 points. We won Tennessee by massive numbers. Wyoming, we won by numbers that are, nobody's ever seen numbers like that. And, you know, places like California, we did great, but when they send out like 38 million ballots, and nobody knows where the hell they're sending them, and then they come pouring back, the whole thing. You know, they passed a law in California that if you work in an election bureau, and if you so much as ask for a voter ID, if you say, sir, ma'am, could I please look at your voter ID? They have the right to put you in jail. You're a criminal. Can you believe that? There's only one reason that happens. They want to cheat. So they had it where voter ID wasn't accepted. But now if you even ask for it, this is seriously a bill that was just signed. It passed in their legislature, and it was signed. And I think when we get things cleaned up and we get back to a little bit of normalcy, I'm going to ask the Speaker to really get involved, because I think we would have won the state of California, because, you know, if you look at my numbers with Hispanic, we're at 56%. And we were winning. We won the Texas border that had never been won. As the governor said, he's doing a good job, the governor, by the way, of Texas. But as the governor said, it hasn't. Oh, did I get lucky? Did I get lucky? Supposing I said, you know, he's not here, but the governor of Texas has done a terrible job. Wow, look at you. You mean we couldn't get you up in the front row? I tell you. Supposing I said, J.D., the governor of Texas, is not doing his job. You heard what I said. See, I didn't know you were there. I said he's doing a great job. He's doing a phenomenal job. But now you're going to have a partner that's going to work with you, because you didn't have, not only didn't he have a partner, he had people selling the wall, right? We have a fence structure that we worked on, the governor worked on with me. And I didn't love it, to be honest with you. I wanted a nice precast concrete, you know, 40, 50 feet high, like a beautiful, could have been a T-shape, Y-shape. I love construction. I wanted that sucker to go up maybe 50, 60 feet. It would have looked beautiful, a nice Y shape. And they said, the problem is, sir, they climbed that like a rabbit. I said, what do you mean? No way. And they brought some of these guys out. They climbed it like... And the other thing is you hit it with acid and the thing will disintegrate. You know, they have things for concrete. So they needed very hardened steel, very special steel. And then they needed 7,000-pound concrete inside that steel, inside that steel. And then they have a rebar that's the toughest steel made. Very hard to cut. So this is why very little is cut. I mean, it's right. And then they put a anti-climb panel on top. I hated it. I said, it's so unattractive. And I said, why would that work? I don't believe it works. And I went to watch the Border Patrol, gave a display. We had actually two sets of climbers. The guys that climb up walls with drugs on their back, I mean, they got like 60, 70 pounds of drug, and they go as fast as you can walk. They go bip, bip, bip. Or we have Mount Everest type climbers. And honestly, the drug guys were much better. I couldn't believe it. The drug guys blew them away, right? But it's true, the anti-climb panel, they couldn't get around it. They just couldn't. You didn't have it. So sometimes you sacrifice beauty for efficiency, and we did. So we built this wall, and we built over 500 miles of wall. That's why we had such good numbers. The famous chart that came down, very thankfully, the chart that came down on my right, Governor. Had I not looked over there, I'm not speaking right now. You might be speaking here. You want to know the truth? You, J.D., and we got a lot of great people in this party, but I got very lucky, but we had the best numbers we've ever had. But I bought, you know what happens is when you fill it up, it's like water. You fill it up. Now we have 571 miles of wall. And they would always say, you know, when we renovated a wall, so there'd be like a piece of plywood
sitting there for 60 years, or a 2x4 sitting for 60 years on the ground and rotting because, you know, and they'll say, you didn't build a new wall. Here we're building 50 feet up in the air, 30 feet sections, 50-foot sections, all steel, all concrete, all everything. And all, by the way, they don't even want me to say this, but what the hell, it doesn't take that long time. They're all wired for all of the equipment. We put wires in everything so they can easily wire for all the different types of equipment. And if there's a doubt, we have a wire. Whenever we just look, you just find the wires all over the place up top, so we can just hook it up. We don't have to have wires on the outside, which wouldn't do too well, right? So anyway, so we built an extra 200 miles of wall, and the governor wanted to buy it. He tried to buy it, and they wouldn't sell it to him. He wanted to put it up himself. Could have been done in 3 to 4 weeks, 200 more miles, because when you do it now, they just keep going further out, further out, further out, getting around. So we did an extra 200 miles, and it was all bought. And they announced that they're not going to put it up. And that's when I realized they wanted open borders, and that's when I realized that people are going to come pouring through the wall like nobody's ever seen before. But you've seen it. A lot of you are here because of that. I made it my #1 issue. They all said inflation was the #1 issue. I said I disagree. I think people coming into our country from prisons and from mental institutions is a bigger issue for the people that I know. And I made it my #1. I talked about inflation too, but you know, how many times can you say that an apple has doubled in cost? I'd say it, and I'd hit it hard, but then I go back to the fact that we don't want criminals coming into our country. We don't want the jails of every country in the world virtually being deposited into the United States. And that man had to suffer with it. And he did an unbelievable job. I'll tell you, he was a very popular governor, but now he's like an unbeatable governor because of your border policies. He was fantastic. And he really was. So. Governor Abbott, he's a great man, great leader. And, but it did make him did you do it? You didn't do that for politics. You did it because you wanted to do the right thing. But I'll tell you, it sure as hell worked for politics too. It's self-preservation, that's right. But no, because the people are demanding it. The people of Texas are demanding it. The people are demanding it all over. So anyway, so we built it, and they wouldn't let us use it. They wouldn't let the governor use it. And other governors, they wouldn't let him use it. But he was the leader of the pack and did a great job. And then we heard about a month ago that not only wouldn't they let us use it, they were selling it. They were going to sell it for 5 cents on the dollar. Now, 5 cents on the dollar then, but today it would cost more than twice as much to build because we bought it like 6 years ago. And it was just sitting on the ground, and that does not do well for the whole thing. But it was just sitting on the ground, and I heard about it, and I called the governor, and I called a lot of people, your attorney general. And here's the story. They were going to buy it, and these are great business people. They were going to buy it for 5 cents on the dollar or less. And they were calling us up, we'll sell it to you for 200 cents on the dollar. In other words, it will cost you twice as much, so it's 200 cents on the dollar. I said, can somebody explain that to a judge? I mean, how corrupt is that? You'd think they'd say, maybe we'll sell it to you for 20 cents, 30 cents, but not 200 cents. So they were going to buy something for 5 cents, and they were going to sell it to us for a fortune. They were going to make it they'd have it down in Fortune magazine, they'd put it of the deal of the year, okay? You buy something like that. But it was so corrupt and so horrible. And when we told that to the administration, they didn't care. They just kept going forward. They couldn't care less. And they kept going forward. They knew that they were trying to sell it back to us. They would have sold it back to us. You would have ended up buying it. You would have paid probably 50, 60 cents, who knows. But they were going to use it for scrap metal, but then they made a much better deal. They could just buy it and sell it to us for 15, 20 times what they paid. 20 times, think of it, like 20 times what they paid. And we wouldn't let it happen. And the governor with his attorney general, Ken Paxton, they made a fantastic, they're a good lawyer. He's pushed around pretty good by people, right? I said, you got a great attorney general. They should leave him alone. He was with me. But Ken and the governor went to court, and a judge actually became incensed and actually called for an investigation. How could a thing like this happen? So he stopped it. So we're waiting to put that wall up. And now that you have a new president, that wall will go up so fast. The governor will complain, sir. This is Greg Abbott, sir. Please, the wall is going up too fast. Please don't do that. You know the story about winning. No, we're going to win too much. We're winning too much. Please, let's stop. People always love that one. We'll do this with the wall. Governor Abbott calls, sir, the wall is going up too fast. We can't take it. We just can't take it. No, I think you'll be very happy if the wall goes up too fast, right? But we'll get that done, and we'll work with you on that. But it was a great decision by a great Texas judge, right? And it was beautiful to watch. He stopped them right in their track. I mean, they were literally loading this stuff onto trucks. It was terrible. Honestly, it was terrible. And he wouldn't take it. So I'm so glad I mentioned that they have a really good governor in Texas. And I swear, I didn't know he was here. I swear to you, it sounds like a setup. I didn't know you would end. Did I get lucky? I said the right thing. Because there have been moments when I wasn't so happy with him, you know? But not too many, I can tell you that. So anyway, it's good to see you too, Governor. Great. But I just want to thank everybody. You've been incredible. I recognize so many of you. It's so crazy. But this has been a long journey. This was a journey that started in 2015, probably started 20 years before that. People used to say, you're going to run for president? You're going to run? And I always said, no, I don't want. And then one day I said, let's give it a shot. And what I talked about then was the border, too. I think it probably was the #1 issue for me. Back in 2015, 2016, I talked about the border. And now I talked about the border, but this border is much worse. We fixed the border. It was totally fixed. There was nothing to talk about. 2020, by the way, that election was totally rigged, but that's okay. It was a rigged election. You know the only thing good about it? It showed how bad they are, showed how incompetent, and frankly, historically, this is a much bigger event. If that would have gone like it should have. The bad thing about it is some bad things happened, like a lot of people in our country that wouldn't be in our country right now. So, you know, that's the bad part. But I will say that it started in 2015, and right from the beginning, we went to the top. Day one, they announced Trump, and Trump went to #1 and stayed there for the whole primary. And then we took on Hillary. She didn't look too happy today. We took on Hillary. A very nice person, but we took on Hillary and we defeated Hillary, and then we did much better the second time in 2020. You know, we got millions more votes. We got millions, like 10, 12 million more votes than we did the first time. No president has ever gotten that many more votes. I got like 9 million more than anybody else had ever gotten, and they said we lost. And because of that, I said to Melania, what do you think? And she said, you want to do this again? And had we lost, and had I thought we lost, I wouldn't do it again, because that's like the ultimate poll, right? But I knew how well we did, and this time we made it too big to rig. It was so big. They tried like hell in the butt. They tried to do it, and around 9:02 they gave up. Last time they did bad things, at this time they just said, yes. You know, I don't know if you saw, Mr. Speaker, in Washington, they had placards. They were all set to march. They thought it'd be closer. A gentleman asked me, a very respected gentleman asked me yesterday, how come the polls were so wrong? They showed you winning, but not in a landslide. I said, because people that are true Trumpers are so angry at the whole polling system and at the writers, the fake news, that they don't want to talk to anybody. So when you call somebody from Trump, who are you voting for? They say, it's none of your business. I'm not telling you. And that was probably 40% of the people they called. So they would discard that one, and they didn't show that. And then when the election happened, you know, the vote came, and it was much different, much higher than, we're going to win, but they really thought, they couldn't believe the one man said, I mean, it was so much higher. We won all 7 swing states. We won the popular vote by millions of votes, which is hard for a Republican. I'll tell you who came through. The unions came through. The auto workers were great. The Teamsters were great. The firemen were great. I think almost every union was great. The only one that weren't great, although Sean
was great. And the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters, was fantastic. But generally speaking, the head of the union was against Trump, but the union would be with us for like 80, 85%. Look what we did with the auto workers in Michigan. Look what we did with the Teamsters. The Teamsters were unbelievable. They were a solid Democrat vote, and they voted for Trump. So we had a great experience. Now we have to go to work and get it done, because we have to do something that's going to be great. We're going to turn our country around, and we're going to turn it around fast. And I think this was a better speech than the one I made upstairs, okay? I think this was better, JD. I think this was much better, and I got to see my friend. So, Governor, take care of yourself. You call me, we'll start working. You know what that means with him? He's going to be calling me tomorrow morning at about 6. And I said, how about next week? You call me, and we're going to get it started real fast. We'll really help you a lot. You've done a fantastic job protecting something which it's not supposed to be for the states. And amazing job you've done. Thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody. And I have a First Lady who's been incredible. She's been incredible. I shouldn't say this. I'm going to get hell when I say this, but her feet are absolutely aching. You know, those heels. And we thought we were leaving. We were going home. Sir, would you be able to go down and say hello to some of your other fans that are here? I said, oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Did you get to see pretty clearly the picture, I hope? Good. That's good. But because you wouldn't want to make the same speech again, right? But she said, darling, I love you so much, but my feet are killing me. I said, honey, let me just see how far it is. I asked the person. Oh, not that long, maybe 400 or 500 yards. That's 5 football fields. I said, can you make it? She said, we're going to make it no matter what. We're going to make it because we have to get, right? Right? And then we went out to the helicopter, though, just prior to this, and said goodbye. And it's a custom, and the wind is blowing like crazy. And with the hat that she's wearing, she almost blew away. We almost lost off her. She was being elevated off the ground. She almost blew away. No. So we all appreciate it, because she's been a great First Lady. A beautiful and a great First Lady. And they love our First Lady. You know, JD, whenever I make a speech, I see hundreds of times, we love our First Lady, we love, and they do, and they should. She's great. So I just want to thank you very much. I just want to thank everybody. And I felt that, I said to JD, should we give him the A treatment, the B treatment, the C, the D, or the F? You know what the F is? Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye. I gave you the A+ treatment. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Governor. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
And there you go. He's back. Donald Trump, the newly sworn-in 47th President of the United States, giving a more traditional speech in the Trump character. His earlier inaugural speech was very disciplined. It was a shopping list of the things that he's going to try to do. That, he even, according to his own words, is a speech that he wanted to give. He was speaking about the people who entered the Capitol, the J6 hostages is what he called them, indicating that he might be delivering some more pardons. He criticised Liz Cheney, some of his enemies, complained about pardons given to Joe Biden, even spoke about anti-climb panels on a border wall with Mexico, and then spoke at length with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, which was a little bit rambling and off the cuff. I think he calls it the weave, Sarah James.
I think that's right. You know, it was instructive, wasn't it? I mean, the speech that he gave to the assembled audience gathered there for the inauguration, those 600 individuals, I almost felt like Susie Wiles, Chief of Staff, incoming Chief of Staff and co-chair of the campaign, that would have been, here's what we're going to do. This was kind of vintage Trump. And that's what we saw play out in the election. You know, there was the disciplined, commercials and the like, and then there was him off the cuff. But his folks love him off the cuff. And he was talking about what he called the unselect committee of political thugs that prosecuted the January 6th case. And of course, Jack Smith was set to bring that forward had President Trump lost this election. So there are some grievances there in addition to the to-do list.
And of course we saw those preemptive pardons from Joe Biden as one of his final things before he left the White House for the last time. So it has been a big morning in Washington.
It certainly
Bridget.
has, and that was a far more casual, unscripted, as you say, Sarah, vintage Trump on display there at the US Capitol Visitor Centre's Emancipation Hall, where people had waited. The overflow crowd who couldn't get into the Rotunda building had been waiting and watching on the screens for probably quite a long time. So that was it was playing to his supporters there, many people who'd been waiting and some familiar faces in the crowd there. He also referenced the temperature. Of course, it was held inside because it was so cold. It is so cold in Washington, D.C. today, but he said there was no suffering in the Rotunda. They made it very warm for him. 72 degrees. He said it was perfect. So quite a humorous speech there in many moments.
And it's a big day in Washington, and we will be keeping you up to date with our special coverage through the morning and our correspondents on the ground in Washington, D.C. But first, we are going to take a bit more of a look at the top headlines.
Outlining change, Donald Trump vows to bring back patriotism, two genders and the so-called golden age of America after being sworn in as the 47th US president.
We will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense.
So I'm very confident that we will
Australia reacts. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, says Australia will not suffer from severe tariffs, with Mr Trump promising him a perfect relationship will continue.
So I'm very confident that we will work these issues through because they're in the interests of both Australia and the United States.
Staggering need. Humanitarian groups cry for urgent aid as the ceasefire in Gaza moves into its second day.
And I'm at Melbourne Park, where Alex de Minaur has booked a spot in the Australian Open quarter-final for the first time in his career.
A very good morning to you. It is Tuesday, the 21st of January. I'm James Glenday.
And I'm Bridget Brennan, coming to you from the land of the Wurundjeri people. You're watching News Breakfast.
Good morning again if you've just joined us. You are watching a special edition of News Breakfast following the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. Before we get more on that top story, we are going to bring you some breaking news out of Sydney, where another suspected anti-Semitic attack appears to have happened, with a childcare centre set on fire and graffiti sprayed on the walls. We're going to be live on the scene with the details of that in just a second. But first, an update on our top story. In the past couple of hours, the President was sworn in along with his Vice President, J.D. Vance. In his inaugural address, Donald Trump pledged to bring back a golden age of American industry and discovery.
Donald Trump promised to usher in a tide of change, vowing to crack down on immigration, bring down inflation and reform the health system. He also announced what he called a colourblind and merit-based society, a policy of only two genders. Donald Trump's second presidential term is sure to reshape society in America and around the world over the next 4 years. We've got our American in Oz, Sarah James, with us here in the studio. Very grateful for your analysis. Sarah, to our viewers just joining us who might have missed the key speech there at the Capitol Rotunda, What were the messages Donald Trump wanted to send to the world and to American society?
Well, this was a speech that really touched on all aspects, everything from what was symbolic to what was economic to some grievances that he had. But at the center of the speech were the words, America first. And I think really the entire speech wrapped around that. And indeed, moments after the speech ended, we received from the White House for immediate release this first set of executive orders that he is going to undertake, and it's listed under America First priorities. So that really was the nature of it. Everything from renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, to talking about ending the era of decline, talking about his own personal odyssey from being in the wilderness to making a historic comeback by any standards, and also making the point that America is going to make changes on immigration, on energy, in education. This is going to be a transformational presidency. There's no question that it will face pushback. I think lawyers are going to be busy. And indeed, I spoke to people over the weekend who said that they were already receiving calls, particularly related to immigration and what they anticipate happening there. But we saw the president deliver a disciplined, comprehensive to-do list as he sets up the second half of a bookend presidency and finishes his agenda.
Now, I'm sure all of you watching this morning will have joined us at 3:30 this morning to watch this live and our special coverage. But just in case you didn't and you are joining us now, here are some of the comments that the new US President Donald Trump made during that inaugural address.
We are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies.
We'll go to our team in the US now. Our North America Bureau Chief, Jade McMillan, is outside the US Capitol. I believe Jade's not quite ready for us, so we might head to our correspondent, Carrington Clark, who's at Capital One Arena for us, where many Donald Trump supporters have been gathering in the cold outside that arena. You're with many Trump supporters there, Carrington. What's the mood like?
Yeah, that forecasted dangerously cold conditions have come to fruition. And unfortunately, the people you're seeing behind me are the people who couldn't get in to the arena today. It only has a capacity of about 20,000. So a lot of Trump supporters were watching the inauguration address and the swearing-in ceremony here. They were hanging on every word for their political hero, Donald Trump, who has once again taken the reins of power, and enjoying it as he promised to fulfill what he campaigned on. What we kept hearing over and over again from people today with the priorities for them were immigration reform, and the economy. And Donald Trump obviously spent a huge amount of time focused on those two areas. Washington, D.C. is a very Democrat town, but Donald Trump has drawn tens of thousands of people from across the country here to Washington, D.C. to celebrate this inauguration. And you are seeing bars and pubs and pizza shops around the corners, lots of people celebrating this day. This is a major event, obviously, in the American political calendar. But the mood here is enthusiasm, even if they are freezing cold.
You certainly look pretty chilly there, Carrington. I'm glad you're rugged up. Look, also in the final hours, we saw the former President Joe Biden sign a number of very important pardons in his final hours.
Yeah, one of the powers that the US president possesses is this ability to pardon people for federal offences, and it is a tradition that US presidents on the way out do often pardon people. But the way that Joe Biden has undertaken that right has been quite interesting to watch. Earlier this morning, we had word that he was preemptively pardoning people involved in the investigation into the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol. Most notably, Liz Cheney, the former member of Congress, a Republican who has become really one of Donald Trump's major political enemies, but also anyone else who was involved in that committee's work. He also notably pardoned Donald Trump's own former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley. Now, Donald Trump has already taken offence at Joe Biden undertaking particularly those pardons because he doesn't think they should have happened. But given that Donald Trump has promised to go after his political enemies, Joe Biden says that he needed to take that step to protect people he says were just doing their job. The other one, obviously notable, was Anthony Fauci, who became really the face of the COVID response here in the United States and has become a vilified figure among many members of the MAGA movement here in the United States. And even though Fauci worked under Donald Trump as well as other administrations, he really has become a hated figure among the MAGA Republicans, and Donald Trump seems to take personal offence at many of his statements, both when he was in power and since. But then just in the last few minutes of Joe Biden's presidency, when he was actually inside the Capitol waiting for the swearing in of Donald Trump, we had word from the White House that Joe Biden was pardoning his own family members, his own siblings and their spouses. Now, he says this is not evidence of any sort of wrongdoing, but again, he says that he has been targeted politically and his family have been targeted. So he wanted to take a step to ensure that they weren't prosecuted or persecuted after he left office. But this will be a footnote now to Joe Biden's 5-decade-long political career, that in the dying days of his presidency, that was the step he felt he needed to take. And that obviously comes after he pardoned his own son, Hunter Biden, who had actually been convicted of a crime and was facing another potential trial. But this will obviously be seized upon by Joe Biden's critics on the MAGA right as evidence, as they say, of this Biden crime family, despite the fact there has not been any evidence of a widespread conspiracy. But yes, quite an extraordinary last move by Joe Biden while he still had that power at his disposal.
All right, Carrington, thank you. And I think we can bring in our North America Bureau Chief, Jade McMillan, now. G'day again, Jade. Let's go back to the actual swearing-in ceremony, because it was a bit unusual, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't the inauguration that we're used to seeing here in the United States. Normally you'd have the president sworn in outside the Capitol building. There'd be thousands of people on the National Mall watching that ceremony unfold. But because of these freezing cold conditions that we've got here, it's currently about -5 degrees Celsius. It feels a lot colder than that. The decision was made to move the swearing in inside the Capitol Rotunda. That meant that there was a limited guest list. A lot of Donald Trump supporters who'd travelled into Washington from other parts of the country couldn't be there in person. There were a number of dignitaries, though, all of the living former US presidents, a couple of world leaders, and several tech leaders, including the billionaire Elon Musk, someone who has become so politically aligned with Donald Trump and who poured huge amounts of money into supporting his election campaign and who has been given a job in his new administration. Mark Zuckerberg was also there, along with Jeff Bezos. Now, as is tradition, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, was sworn in first, and then Donald Trump once again took the oath of office. He was surrounded by his family, his wife Melania, and his children. And in this first speech that he has now made as the 47th President of the United States, he promised that he'd return this country to what he called a golden age. He argued that the US was in a state of decline and that he'd overhaul the work of the Biden administration. He spent quite a lot of this speech criticising the Biden administration, including on areas like its response to recent natural disasters such as the Los Angeles fires. He repeated accusations that the justice system had been weaponised against him, remembering that Donald Trump enters the White House as a convicted felon, having been recently sentenced in the New York hush money case. Here's a little bit more of what he had to say as he spoke just after being returned to power.
The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
That's Donald Trump speaking there in his inaugural address, and since then he's given another much more informal address. And Jade, in those two different speeches, he has spoken a bit about what he wants to achieve. The new White House has even sent out a list of Trump's America First priorities that are very, very varied, to say the least. What are some of the things that he is promising to do on his first day?
Well, he'd insisted in the lead up to this moment that he would be moving very quickly to implement his second term agenda. As expected, immigration is a really big focus of day one. He campaigned extensively on the issue of border security, and he's announced today that he will be declaring a national emergency on the US southern border with Mexico, that he'll be sending troops to the border and immediately beginning deporting people who have crossed the border without authorisation. He's previously promised to carry out the largest deportation program in American history. He's also announced changes to energy policy. He had this campaign slogan of drill, baby, drill. He wants to open up more oil and gas drilling. He's also said that he's going to again withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. The White House, the new White House, is saying that it will end diversity programs in the federal government, that it will only formally recognise the two genders of male and female, something we didn't hear from Donald Trump in that inaugural address. He did touch on it in those remarks he delivered later, but still, as far as I can see, hasn't spelled out exactly what he is going to do, is on the issue of potentially pardoning some of the people who were convicted after the January 6th Capitol attacks, the attack on this very building that took place when Donald Trump had refused to accept his election defeat to Joe Biden. He has suggested that at least some of the people convicted will be pardoned, but yet to see exactly what that could involve.
All right, Jade McMillan, our North America Bureau Chief, thank you. And Bridget, it has been quite a morning. There's plenty going on.
It certainly has, and we'll return to our coverage of Donald Trump's return to power. But first, let's get our headlines with Emma.
Thanks, Bridget. Good morning to you all. A childcare centre in Sydney's east has been targeted in the latest anti-Semitic attack. Authorities say the building in Maroubra was set on fire just before 1 o'clock this morning and has been badly damaged. Police say anti-Semitic graffiti was also spray painted on an external wall of the centre, which is a short distance from the Maroubra synagogue. Police have set up a crime scene and are appealing for anyone with information to come forward. Humanitarian groups warn the need for aid in Gaza is staggering as a fragile ceasefire deal enters its second day. The head of the International Rescue Committee, which is focused on water, sanitation and child protection, says it could take time to deliver the aid required. The ceasefire deal requires 600 truckloads of aid to be allowed into Gaza every day of the initial 6 weeks. A Category 3 tropical cyclone churning off the coast of far northwestern Australia is moving away from the area in a southwesterly direction. The Weather Bureau says Cyclone Sean has now peaked in intensity and is forecast to weaken further. Hundreds of people have been affected by power outages. Meanwhile, severe to extreme heatwave warnings have been issued for parts of Western Australia, Queensland, northern New South Wales and the Northern Territory. With temperatures to soar into the mid-40s in some areas, people are urged to stay somewhere cool and keep hydrated. Severe heat waves are especially dangerous for older people, children and pregnant women. More than 200 public sector psychiatrists in New South Wales are expected to walk off the job today amid an ongoing pay dispute. They're demanding a 25% pay rise as the state grapples with a mental health crisis. The dispute will go before the Industrial Relations Commission today, with the state government seeking urgent arbitration. New programs to teach young men and boys about healthy relationships will be set up in remote communities in the NT and WA under a new $12 million commitment by the Albanese government. It comes after a landmark inquest into the violent deaths of 4 Aboriginal women in domestic violence attacks.
And a look at our global markets this morning. The futures pointing up as well as the Dow. The Aussie dollar buying 62.6 US cents this morning. And now it's time for sport.
And Catherine is, I think, still at the Australian Open. She's been very excited. She predicted that Alex de Minaur would win, and he lives to fight another day, Catherine.
Hello to you, James. Of course I'm here at the Australian Open. Where else would I be? I understand it's a big news day, but as you just said, massive news. Alex de Minaur has booked a spot in the Australian Open quarterfinals for the first time in his career. Last year, he made the quarterfinal of every other Grand Slam on the tour. This is his year to play at the Australian Open. He defeated the American Alex Michelsen in straight sets, 6-love, 7-6, 6-3. Next up, he faces the reigning champion, Jannik Sinner. Here's what he had to say after the win.
Jannik is a hell of a player. It's going to be my first match this whole tournament where I'm the underdog and don't have all the pressure and expectation of having to win. So it's quite exciting, and I'm looking forward to that.
He won't have pressure and expectation because these two players have met 9 times, and I have very bad news for you. Jannik Sinner has won all 9 of those meetings, but I've got a feeling about this year's Australian Open.
Wow, I wonder what a feeling is, Bridget.
It's positive. It's positive. It's
just
positive.
Just a feeling.
Well, your prediction yesterday came true, so we trust in your feelings, Catherine.
It did.
And I'm not sure Catherine is capable of negative feelings, let's be honest. And neither is Nate, who is here with the weather.
Morning, team. Sarah James, welcome to the desk. Great job this morning. We've got a little bit of wild weather to talk about, but luckily, mostly not onshore. It's going to be fine for all of the southern capitals today, and we've just got a possible shower up top in Darwin. But I'm keeping an eye on Tropical Cyclone Sean, now a Category 4. It intensified overnight, but it also moved offshore. So heat becomes the main focus today. We've still got some flood watches on for WA. High fire danger for large parts of the south of the country. Some stormy weather just ringing in the nation, but the vast majority of us are staying completely clear. I'll still watch Sean, but it's pretty much done with us, I think, team. So we shouldn't have to be talking about cyclone watches or warnings at all for the rest of the week ahead.
Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot,
for that,
Nate. Let's get more on one of our other main stories we're following this morning, that breaking news out of Sydney, where police are investigating a fire at a childcare centre in the city's east. Our reporter Miles Holbrook-Walk is at the scene for us. Good morning, Miles. What do we know so far?
Well, good morning, Bridget. Some concerning news from this morning in Maroubra, where I am right now. It was in the early hours that police reported an incident about 1 a.m. at this very childcare centre right behind me here, where we've seen 2 incidents reported and now investigating by police here. So the first one is that there was some graffiti along this wall that the police say is anti-Semitic. While we haven't seen the graffiti itself as it's been washed over, there is vision of these walls here that appears to show the F word as well, and that is the only imagery we can see from that exact shot, but police are also saying that it is anti-Semitic in nature. Now, separately to that, there was at this very site some sort of fire lit as well beyond the walls behind me again here. Now, when we arrived at the scene just 20 minutes or so ago, you could still smell a smoky smell within the air, but no fire crews are here at the moment. It's just police cars as well as police tape blocking off this street. Now, police have locked down this area as they do their investigations still, but quite quiet overall. There isn't a lot of movement from police officers at the moment, just merely securing this scene for now. However, there may be more officers behind examining a secondary crime scene there, but the graffiti, at least on this wall here, has been washed off. Now, it comes in a climate in Sydney right now where there is a very real fear around anti-Semitic incidents, particularly involving graffiti as well as fires as well. We've seen incidents in the inner west, in Newtown at a synagogue, in southern Sydney, in Allawa there as well. Another synagogue was defaced. This childcare centre here is not an explicitly Jewish institution or organisation. There may well be Jewish children that attend this childcare, as there's a synagogue about 150 metres down the road, but in itself it's not a Jewish outlet or organisation or provider of childcare. But certainly, of course, that police are describing this as an anti-Semitic incident is cause for concern at a time when both the state, local and federal governments are calling for unity and an end to such incidents on the streets of Sydney. Bridget?
Another concerning incident. Miles, thanks very much for taking us through it, and we'll come back to Miles throughout the program.
Now, if you are just joining us, you are watching our special coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States. There's been a lot going on in Washington this morning. We've already heard from the new president twice, and there he is there a short time ago, beginning to sign some of dozens of expected executive orders to take action on what his administration calls his America First priorities. He outlined a lot of them in his inaugural speech and elaborated on them slightly in a more rambling, informal speech after that. They include everything from renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, to action on energy and action on immigration as well. And let's get some more on this top story, because world leaders have been sending their congratulations to the newly inaugurated US president. We're joined now by our Europe Bureau Chief, Mazoe Ford. Mazoe, good morning. Who have we heard from so far in your part of the world?
Good morning, James. Well, we have heard very early from President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, who said he wanted to congratulate Donald Trump and the American people. He said this was a day of change and also a day of hope. We know that he's very hopeful that Donald Trump will be able to continue to help Ukraine the way that the Biden administration has done in the past. He's hoping that the aid will continue, that the military assistance will continue there as well. But of course, nobody knows yet. We've also heard from Vladimir Putin earlier today, in fact, before the inauguration ceremony. During a press conference, he said that he noted the statements by Donald Trump on a desire to restore direct contact with Russia. He said he heard the statement about the need to do everything possible to prevent World War III, and that the goal should be not be a brief ceasefire, but lasting peace. We've heard from Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister here, who offered his warmest congratulations congratulations and said that he looked forward to continuing the uniquely close bond between the US and the UK. He described the unshakable foundations and the historic alliance in his statement as well. King Charles has written to congratulate and also reflected on that enduring special relationship between the UK and the US, and a whole host of other European leaders as well there, James.
And Mazoe, while all of those leaders have been very warm with their congratulations, there has been some nervousness as well about what lies ahead with the Trump administration. Tell us about that.
Yeah, for sure, James. Ukraine is the big concern in this part of the world because people just don't know what Donald Trump is going to do. There are Ukraine concerns. There are also concerns about trade tariffs that we know that Donald Trump wants to impose tariffs on imports into the United States. It's a guessing game in this part of the world, around the world in general, but certainly here with Ukraine and with trade tariffs. European leaders have been trying to get together and figure out what to do, whether they can come together, whether they can lobby him separately. On Ukraine, we know Volodymyr Zelensky has met with Donald Trump on the sidelines of the Notre Dame reopening in Paris back in November, thanks to President Macron. So it's a guessing game over here. Everybody waiting to see what Donald Trump will do once he turns his attention to foreign policy, James.
All right, Mazoe Ford, our Europe Bureau Chief there in London. Thank you. Now, let's get an update, Bridget, on last night's action at the Australian Open, because Catherine Murphy is live from Melbourne Park. Good morning again, Catherine. And you were right, weren't you? It was a very successful night for Alex de Minaur.
It was indeed. Hello to you, James. Good morning, everyone. This is an epic achievement for Alex de Minaur. This time last year, he made the fourth round of the Australian Open for the fourth consecutive year this year, should I say. So last year, his third consecutive fourth round. That's where it ended. But he went on to make the quarterfinal of the remaining 3 Grand Slams. But Alex de Minaur makes it really clear this is the tournament that means most to him. He always wants to play well at home. In fact, his first ever ATP title was won at the Sydney International. That was back in 2019. He's a Sydney sider. He was so proud. He's finally made it to the quarterfinal. And he's done it with a clinical win over the American Alex Michelsen. He handed him what we like to call in tennis, James, a bagel. 6-love in the first set, 7-6, 6-3 to book that quarterfinal spot. The only bad news is that next he faces the reigning champion, Jannik Sinner. Here's what he had to say after the match.
Jannik is a hell of a play. It's going to be my first match this whole tournament where I'm the underdog and don't have all the pressure and expectation of having to win. So it's quite exciting, and I'm looking forward to that.
That is one of the toughest assignments in tennis. James, you know what I love about this for Alex de Minaur? He has not changed one bit since I first met him when he was 17 years old. He was an orange boy for the Davis Cup team. He is still the humble, hard-working legend that he always has been. I love it when good things happen for good people. He deserves every bit of this success.
Oh, that's lovely. And in cricket, in the Washes, Australia has already retained the trophy after last night's T20 win.
I'm just so relieved that we've got to talk about this, James, because I know it's a big day. I believe there was a big event over in the US, but all you have been worried about is when are we going to get to talk about the cricket? You've been on the text line. You were on the text line last night asking, when are we going to talk about the cricket? Here we are. And that is because the Australian women's team have retained the Ashes with that T20 win last night in Sydney. There's a lot of the series yet to go, more T20 clashes, and of course, we're all counting down to the test in Melbourne next week. I can't wait for that one. But that win last night came despite James angst over injuries to Elisa Healy, Ash Gardner. The guy couldn't sleep last night. I don't know how he's presented this morning. So England decided to field Beth Mooney. That was a very bad decision, by the way, because Beth Mooney smashed 75 to get Australia to a total of 198. And then Australia bowled out the tourists for 141. James, how do you do it? Because all you think about is cricket. You couldn't sleep last night, yet you were up so early.
Catherine, I needed this.
He's a multitasker.
It's been a stressful summer. I've had to move house. I've been packing boxes, and it was made so much worse by Jasprit Bumrah causing all sorts of problems for the Australian batting order. And so last night it was so reassuring to go to bed after watching Talia McGrath flog England around the park and have them talk about learning from their mistakes. And the Ashes are done. It was awesome. It was awesome.
The Ashes are done, and you don't even want the test next week to be competitive. When I suggested it would be nice to have a competitive test, James said no. I don't want it to be competitive. So that's all from me.
No. All right, Catherine Murphy there at the Australian Open. Let's get some more news now. Here's Emma.
Thanks, James. US President Donald Trump has vowed to bring back free speech, patriotism and the so-called Golden Age of America in his inaugural address. The 47th US president vowed to build the nation's manufacturing, oil and gas industry. He also announced a policy of recognising only 2 genders.
We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders, male and female.
A childcare centre in Sydney's east has been targeted in the latest anti-Semitic attack. Authorities say the building in Maroubra was set on fire just before 1 this morning and has been badly damaged. Police say anti-Semitic graffiti was also spray painted on an external wall of the centre, which is a short distance from the Maroubra synagogue. Humanitarian groups warn the need for aid in Gaza is staggering as a fragile ceasefire deal enters its second day. As relief trucks enter, the head of the International Rescue Committee, which is focused on water, sanitation and child protection, says it could take time to deliver the aid required. And in his final hours as US President, Joe Biden has preemptively pardoned a number of public servants to prevent what he called unjustified and politically motivated prosecutions. Among those pardoned are former White House Chief Medical Advisor Anthony Fauci and retired General Mark Milley, who's described the incoming president as fascist to the core.
All right, let's head back to the United States now. Following the inauguration of President Donald Trump, the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, is in Washington, where she's been representing the Australian government at today's proceedings alongside Australia's Ambassador Kevin Rudd, and I'm pleased to say she joins us now. Minister, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
You're the first foreign minister to attend an inauguration, but the cold weather kind of upturned plans just a couple of days out. Did you have a good vantage point? Did you get inside?
Yes, I had the privilege of attending the inauguration and being just a few seats back from watching the President speak. I want to say, first, on behalf of the country, we congratulate President Trump on his inauguration. It was an honour and a privilege for me to be there, as you say, the first time the Australian Foreign Minister has been invited, and I was very honoured to represent our country at such an important event, the peaceful transfer of power in this great democracy.
In the past, you've been quite critical of Donald Trump. You're not alone in that, of course. The former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, now Ambassador, was too. Do you believe that your invitation to this event is a sign that the Trump administration has moved on and forgotten that?
Look, I am going to continue to be focused on doing the job I have for the Australian people, which is to represent Australia here and around the world, to engage with the new administration in the interests of Australians, in our economic interests and our national security interests. I'm privileged to be here, privileged to be the first Foreign Minister invited, and I look forward to meeting Marco Rubio, my counterpart, the new Secretary of State, tomorrow.
What sort of message are you hoping to deliver in that meeting? And we heard from the new President this morning. He spoke a bit about tariffs. Are you confident that Australia can avoid facing tariffs?
Well, in relation to tariffs, what I would say is, America has had a trade surplus with Australia since President Truman's time, and it's around 2-1 in the US's favour. And in fact, a great proportion, around half of our exports to the United States, go into the American supply chain. So we are a very valued ally. We're also a very valued trading partner, which provides great value for the United States. But my one message to Secretary Rubio is that this is a really important alliance. It's an important alliance for Australia and for the United States. And together and through the Quad, the 4 countries, Japan, India, US and Australia, we all play our part in assuring peace and prosperity in our region.
Australia, I think it's fair to say, is probably a little way down Donald Trump's to-do list. Some people might argue that's a good place to be. Do you think that the Prime Minister will meet with the new President before the Australian election? And could you see President Trump visiting Australia during this next term?
Oh, look, this is all, interesting discussion, but the President has only just been inaugurated, so obviously today is a day of great celebration here in Washington. In terms of future meetings, I'm sure the Prime Minister will have the opportunity at the appropriate time to meet the President. We're very pleased that there was a very early call and a very warm and friendly call with the President-elect.
Donald Trump loves a bit of pomp and pageantry, though. You're not going to extend the offer of a state visit to him, are you, while you're on this trip?
He has only just been inaugurated, but we're always pleased in Australia to receive an American president at a convenient time.
All right, fair enough. Just on another topic, I don't want to keep you too long. I know your time is limited. Just the ceasefire in Gaza. Are you confident that this is going to be a lasting one? Can it hold?
Look, of course it's challenging. We've seen that because this ceasefire has been so close to being agreed to and implemented for some time. What I would say is that it was so moving to see the first of these hostages released under the ceasefire. I had the opportunity when I was in Israel to meet with some of the families of hostages. That was searing for me. I have never forgotten, the pain of those parents and brothers and sisters and friends. So it was very moving to see the images and the footage of hostages coming home, and we hope that many more do. We hope that this peace does hold and we can see stability and peace in the region and humanitarian aid being provided.
All right, Foreign Minister Penny Wong, we are out of time. Thank you very much for squeezing us in this morning on what has been a big day, of course, for the United States, but you personally as well.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to be with you.
Now, Bridget, Donald Trump's inauguration, as we were just sort of talking about, comes just a day after that ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was reached in the Middle East. Our Global Affairs editor, John Lyons, is in Jerusalem this morning. John, good morning. Firstly, what did you make of Donald Trump's inauguration speech?
Well, James, to me it was like one of his stump sort of campaign speeches. I was in Washington to cover the election and heard many of those sorts of speeches. It sounded like a speech almost a week before the election. I thought it was one of the least impressive, least visionary speeches. I mean, those inauguration speeches in American history have usually been the big occasion for that president to mark their vision, to unite the country, bring everybody together, the 50% or the 45% who didn't vote for them. Even going back to Abraham Lincoln, the famous phrase that he appealed to the better angels of our nature when he was trying to deal with a civil war that was about to happen. Or Theodore Roosevelt talked about the welfare of mankind. John Kennedy, of course, the famous "Don't ask what you can do for what the country can do for you, what you can do for your country." Yet in Donald Trump, you know, we heard drill, baby, drill again. And we heard that you should be able to buy whatever car you want. I thought it was completely underwhelming. I thought it was one of the least impressive inaugural speeches for a long time. But he did appeal to the base. To me, it was red meat to the base. All the things that he said during the campaign, but no effort to bring together the country. And he had the 4 former presidents behind him. And he really did nothing to try to bring together that history in America, which is so important to that country.
And John, what do you expect will be Donald Trump's top priorities on the world stage? That's not something we heard a lot about.
No, that's right, James. Didn't get much of a run in that speech, the inauguration speech. My feeling is that now that this dispute here, the Israeli-Hamas dispute or conflict war, has been sort of, it's on in the ceasefire mode at the moment, I expect that his priority will be China, probably tariffs, and it will be Ukraine. I think he's fascinated by Vladimir Putin, and he said he can resolve the Ukraine war in 24 hours. That's not possible, but I think that will become one of his big aims, to try to resolve that war between Russia and Ukraine.
And you're obviously coming to us from Jerusalem. How is the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas going? And, of course, the exchange of people?
Well, James, so far so good. We're 24 hours into it now. It still is a ceasefire. There's no sirens going off here. There's no rockets, bombs being dropped on Gaza. That's good news. Aid trucks are going into Gaza, desperately needed by the people there. There's quiet in southern Israel. And the hostage exchange has happened, of course, last night with the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners. So far so good. It's one day at a time, but it looks like we might be able to get through this first 6 weeks, then hopefully phase 2 will come in. So good, as good a news as you could hope for out of the Middle East.